West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Republicans are trying to make the case that the FBI has become a hotbed of deep state liberalism, intent on purging the agency of patriots and real conservatives. Joining us now is former FBI agent Peter Strzok and Mary McCord, former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the DOJ. She is also a co-host of the MSNBC podcast, Prosecuting Donald Trump. Thank you guys both for being here. Peter, as a former FBI agent, I must ask you about this idea that the FBI is a hotbed of deep state liberalism. True or false?
Alex, absolutely false. Look, I spent more than 20 years in the organization. It is absolutely a conservative organization, whether that's politically, whether it's in terms of its view of law and order, whether it's in terms of sort of broadly in a societal sense. It isn't something that is talked about. I mean, it is just sort of the culture is one that is generally conservative, but it's not, people don't sit there having political discussions over the lunch table, but to assert in any way, shape, or form that it is a hotbed of liberalism is absolutely absurd, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, it seems like indeed nothing could be further from the truth, Mary, because NBC had reporting that not only was the FBI not a hotbed of like hippie liberalism, in fact, an unnamed FBI official warned last year, I believe, or before the January 6th attack, we learned of this last year, that an FBI official warned that there is at best a sizable percentage of the employee population of January 6th of the FBI that felt sympathetic to the group that stormed the Capitol. I'm getting my timing wrong all over the place here, but just to repeat this reporting, there was a warning that a sizable portion of the FBI employee population was sympathetic to the January 6th insurrection. That does not smack of liberalism. That smacks of something entirely different. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's been troublesome reporting ever since that it came out. And, I think that there is a big difference between maybe some people in the FBI who might have thought, okay, there are people who believe that there was fraud in the election. Some of those people got swept up in this. There's a difference between members of the FBI who might think that and others like the men you were speaking about before the break who were testifying today on Capitol Hill, who actually, it appears from the reporting and from what's been reported about the letter that the FBI sent to Jim Jordan about why their security clearances were revoked, that reporting suggests far more than sympathy. Sympathy is concerning, but it actually suggests that active measures were taken to try to suppress investigations into January 6th attackers, and also to, not cooperate with the arrest of someone for whom there was an arrest warrant. And so those types of things are very, very concerning. I hope and believe that that's not the predominant view among the FBI. as Pete said, it's a conservative organization generally, and I think the lean to think it's a hotbed of liberalism is quite the opposite of what it is. But I do hope that these views that we're hearing today are quite the minority.
Yeah, Peter, on that note, it's not just that these men are being proposed. It's not that there's nothing to. Their security clearances are being revoked. There are punitive measures that we're taking against these so-called whistleblowers. But in the same turn, Jim Jordan, who's the chair of the Oversight Committee, is lauding them as brave Americans and heroes. These are people who potentially did not investigate insurrectionists, who objected to their arrest, who hid investigative activity. I mean, that is deeply problematic for the FBI. What did you make of the way in which those problematic behaviors were flipped on their head entirely by the chair of the Congressional Oversight Committee today?
Yeah, well, it is concerning. Look, the last thing the FBI needs is some hyper-partisan congressman trying to take the FBI's action, the FBI's employees, and try and make it into a, one side versus the other sort of organization. Look, in defense of the FBI, the fact of the matter is really complex investigations and prosecutions of the Oath Keepers, of the Proud Boys, have taken place with FBI investigators working with DOJ and have been successfully prosecuted, involving investigation all across the United States. So, by and large, the vast majority of the FBI is doing their job without fear or favor and just pursuing the facts wherever they lie. The problem is the FBI is a large organization, and with 35,000 people, you are going to find people on both extremes. And so when you get people like Congressman Jordan, who select these people who are on the far right with really outrageous behaviors, that to lose your clearance, to have it revoked, not suspended, but revoked, gone forever, you have to really engage in some rather extraordinarily dangerous behavior. And for Jim Jordan to take those people, to take that behavior and somehow try and champion that as what is to be expected or should be expected, is really sending the wrong message to the American people. And it's absolutely nothing, I'm sure, that the FBI wants to hear from him.
Well, and Peter, the second part of that is he's using them as a cudgel against the FBI. I mean, and it appears to be working, at least if you listen to right-wing media. Laura Ingraham yesterday said, "I don't know anyone who trusts the FBI anymore." This is coming on the heels of the Durham report, which purportedly was an explosive an expose on how the investigators investigating shouldn't have been investigating. I mean, I just wonder what you think the end game is here, given that we're talking about the FBI and there's legitimately a phrase out there that people are repeating, and it goes something like defund the FBI. What's the end game for Republicans?
Well, the end game is to try and neuter any sort of possibility of investigations of Trump. There are multiple things going on right now, certainly through Special Counsel Jack Smith, but other things related to Trump, whether it is, the things with Special Counsel, the Mar-a-Lago document process, all the January 6th activity. The goal is to undermine support of the FBI so that they cannot effectively pursue any sort of an investigation of Donald Trump. It's not going to work. Now, the problem, of course, is these FBI agents, the ex-FBI agents that we've saw, have some of these extreme views, and the question is, where did they hear them? Well, the answer is, in many cases, they heard them from places like Fox News. So you get this sort of echo chamber where Fox and others are promulgating these crazy theories. Agents and others are listening to them and believing them, and then are turning up on these same shows to further, amplify and bounce right back into that ecosystem. So it's a dangerous cycle, but at the end of the day, the goal is to make it harder for the FBI to pursue any investigations or violations of the law surrounding Donald Trump.
Yeah, Mary, I wonder what you think about that, because we know from some reporting in the Washington Post that there was a disagreement between FBI field agents and DOJ prosecutors over the search of Donald Trump's property down at Mar-a-Lago. Do you think this new narrative that's emerging about the FBI being somehow anti-conservative will affect its ability or its desire to investigate all corners of Trump's potential criminal wrongdoings?
I really don't, because I agree with Pete here. I mean, it's a huge organization. I think most of the agents, I worked with FBI for more than 20 years in my career at the Department of Justice. And I can say, we didn't have political conversations. I never felt like anyone was making any decision. Now, granted, I wasn't investigating the former president of the United States, but I was involved in some pretty sensitive investigations. And I guess I shouldn't say I wasn't investigating the former president of the United States, because Pete and I both were involved in the Russia investigation while we were still in government. But my point is, I never saw anything that suggested to me that politics was infecting their work. And I think that to the extent that there are disagreements, and sometimes often there are, within the FBI, within the Department of Justice, and between the Department of Justice and the FBI about tactics and strategies with respect to investigative measures that will be taken in a case, those things happen, and they happen even in uncontroversial cases. And so, but ultimately, the buck stops. If it has to go all the way to the Attorney General, that's where the buck stops, and decisions get made. And if an agent can't do their job, that agent would get removed from the case. But I think that most of the agents will be, doing exactly. They're working with the prosecutors, they're working the investigations, and I feel confidence in their ability to get the job done.
It is Friday, the 19th of May of 2023. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the Yorkie, is our hostess and will be seating you directly. And our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yes, a plane of existence, and I'm talking about like the vast plains of yore. Okay, whatever. The French 77s are virtually mixed and poured and ready for your virtual imbibing pleasure. If you happen to be imbibing in what we call real life, take care. Yes, it is a very potent spirit, very well balanced. In fact, in my opinion, and it's not just an opinion, it truly is a fact, it is the most balanced cocktail in the history of cocktails. And I'm telling you, it's true. It is. And then we can discuss and have a debate about what is truth. Thought we already got through that. But no, we got to do it all again. Okay. Alrighty, so Ron DeSantis apparently has thrown his hat in the ring. Jesus Christ. Alright. Some really good pieces on his wife, Casey. Except I want to read more about the mob connections. That's what I like to read about when you deal with corrupt individuals like they. Mm-hmm. And they do. Familial, actually. Shocking, isn't it? It is shocking. So, she has unbridled ambition, which I think is sort of like a hit that most women get anyway. So I kind of just, gloss that over. Unbridled ambition. Like, who doesn't? And anyway, but I have to say, I don't know if I really like her. She seems quite corrupt. This supposed charity where she's collecting money for hurricane victims with no accounting. Mm-hmm. We've seen that one before, right? Trump.org. Jesus Christ. Stealing from cancer kids, that's not enough. Let's steal from hurricane victims. In spite of the fact that there are already government programs in which to, address what she supposedly thinks that she's addressing. Except with the government programs, there's too much oversight regulation, and you can't skim off the top, let alone the bottom and everything in between. Jeez. If the Trumps can do it, why can't we? Well, were they finally, ultimately able to? Aren't people going to jail? Yeah, but they lived high off the hog for quite a few years, if not decades. Mm-hmm. So maybe running for president is something you don't want to do if you have got a can of worms that might cause you to open up a can of worms. That's the problem with opening up a can of worms. It opens up a can of worms. No one wants that. And then once you got it, what do you got to do? You got to fix it. Some people just say, okay, I can live with it. Jesus. I like the idea of fixing it before it becomes a problem. But oh well. Not all of us had the great educations and moral structure to know right from wrong, in spite of the fact that it's a me, me, me type of society. Yep. Can't spell society without me. What? I don't know. It's Friday, and I'm not even drinking a French 77 yet because it's much too early. Oh, yes. Little secret. Those who say that they have cocktails on hand, yes, they don't. But I like the image of it, having a smoking jacket, and I don't smoke. Cocktail in hand. I do have all the mixings for the cocktail. I don't know about you, but I don't drink as much as I used to. And I didn't drink that much to begin with because I didn't like being drunk in public. Well, not too drunk. Oh, yeah, maybe a little story for those of you who may have forgotten. But I did embarrass myself on stage by being a little bit too loaded and drunk, and I never let that happen again. The most feeble applause, just a polite little feeble applause at the end. And that was so devastating. I decided I am not the type that can get all messed up and go up on stage and give a good performance. Up to that point, I thought, oh yeah, you have to get all messed up, get up on stage, and you'll just automatically give a good performance. No, there are some people apparently that can, and I'm one that wasn't able to. So I made a vow I will never do that again. So one thing leads to another, and next thing you know, hey, I guess I didn't fall into the scourge of drug addiction like apparently quite a few of my friends and, I wouldn't call them heroes, but people I respected in terms of their musical ability and creative endeavor, who have passed along the way, damaged their bodies through an overabundance of high living. Mm-hmm. I thought maybe I was just too chicken to do it. And I guess that could have been a survival technique. Who knows? Yep. I think another aspect is I didn't want to be so messed up that I might hurt someone else. That was another part, too. In all of his manifestations, whether behind the wheel or just being in a room saying terrible things to people because you have no filter. Is that how you really feel? I don't know. It might just be the gin talking. Yep, might be. Anyway, we live in a civilized society, and we might as well take our civilization with us on safari, okay? Break out the trunks. Let's get the bar set up. Yeah, okay. Well, it's Friday. Made it through the week. And we have a whole weekend ahead of us, and who knows what's going to happen there. Boy. I just want to remind folks, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, that it wasn't the hippies and the punks that brought this whole shithouse down in flames. Okay? It was the brown shoe conservatives with their weird crew cuts. Military precision. That are the chaos agents, have been the chaos agents, just like we said they were. They blamed us. No hippies in the South. I remember those days. Stay away from the South. If you're hitchhiking with long hair, you might not make it out of the South. We've come a long way. All right. Enough of the freeform whatever. What do we have in store for you here in the Bistro Cafe as we begin this fabulous Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? Yeah, Jim Jordan's choice of witnesses raises questions about right-wing extremism within the FBI. I'll get it out. Now, I have to say, back in the day, and you may remember this too, we had a kid whose dad in high school, his dad was an FBI agent, and he came and gave a presentation and talk at the school. And I remember thinking, does he have a dossier on all of us? because it was just a given. The FBI was sort of like our Stasi, and they knew everything about everyone. And if they didn't have a dossier on you, it meant that you weren't, dangerous enough to be on their radar. And I remember thinking that was a bad thing. I'm not notorious enough to have a dossier. Damn. Yeah, you don't want to have a dossier. Not like that. So when they talk about right-wing extremism, we remember J. Edgar Hoover talk about right-wing extremism. My God. Well, it's a lot worse now, isn't it? Like I said, a lot of the chaos agents came from all of those Law and Order types. And we knew that was just a patronizing dodge, too. They didn't believe in law and order. Not for them, but for us. Yeah, the weirdos. On the rest of the menu, the governor of Rhode Island signed a bill to fund abortion coverage for state workers and Medicare recipients. Actually, it's Medicaid recipients. TikTok content creators filed a lawsuit against Montana over its first-in-the-nation law banning the app. And the firearms industry could face more legal risk under a bill approved by Illinois lawmakers. And let's hope that happens. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where French lawmakers have voted to ban smoking in all forests and woods during the fire season. And you know how hard that's going to be. And China's predatory loans are pushing the world's poorest countries to the brink of collapse. I wonder where they learned it. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so and everything else that she does. If you out there in radio listening land would then look across the page at our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the left from that chat room link, you'll notice the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help. And we thank those of you who have done so, and recently as well. So that's it's very generous of you, and it really, I have to tell you, it really does help, because the bills keep coming, and we found that as long as we pay our bills, we're able to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance, and therefore fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. Over a dozen. Yeah, that's right. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, while we're still there as Netroots Radio, okay? But you'll find us also on Mastodon and Spoutable at Netroots Radio. There you go. And Tom takes care of that. And thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. But you can always find the link to the show notes and links diaries by going to my social media feed, because the links are there. And then that'll take you to the links that get you to, well, the actual articles in which we derive such mirth and awe from. Okay. You can also follow the show on Twitter, such as it is, at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, let's see here. Oh, did you hear Andy Rourke passed away, the bassist from the Smiths? I always thought Morrissey, was okay. He kind of had interesting patter and style and way he sang and constructed his lyrics. But this tilt towards the right wing kind of went against everything that we as punks stood for. And fortunately, the band, The Smiths, hewed much more to the left than a Morrissey. But Andy Rourke was quite a bassist, and a bassist extraordinaire. So, sad passing, age 59, I believe it was pancreatic cancer, and that sucks. Okay, here we go, folks. The first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Associated Press, and it looks like staff at the Associated Press brings us this first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Talk about redundancy. Rhode Island Governor Daniel McKee signed a bill into law that would let state funds be used to pay for health insurance plans that cover state workers and Medicaid recipients seeking abortions. The signing ceremony was held almost immediately after the state Senate approved the measure yesterday, Thursday, on a 24-12 vote following less than an hour of debate in the chamber. McKee, a Democrat, said he was proud to sign the bill into law and include related funding in his state budget proposal. Here in Rhode Island, we will always protect a woman's right to choose and ensure equal access to these crucial health care services, he said. An identical version of the measure cleared the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives on April 27th by a 49-24 vote. Democratic State Senator Bridget Valverde, one of the bill's sponsors, said that despite a vote by Rhode Island lawmakers 4 years ago to enshrine the right to safe legal abortion in the state, the work to help guarantee access to abortions was unfinished. For so many, the right has remained elusive, she said. That's because our right to a health care service is useless if we intentionally prevent people's health insurance from covering it. Medicaid patients and state workers deserve to have the same access to care as people enrolled in private health insurance plans, she said. With the new law, doctors will no longer have to tell their low-income patients that their health insurance won't cover their abortion, she added. Opponents said the state should not require state taxpayers, including those with moral objections to the procedure, to cover the cost of abortions. Too bad. We can't pick and choose whether our tax dollars go to the military or not, so shut the F up. Grow up. Take a civics class. About a quarter of Rhode Islanders are covered by Medicaid, and another 30,000 are covered by state employee plans, backers of the new law said. They have had to pay out of pocket for the full costs of abortions. In his budget plan for fiscal year 2024, McKee includes funding to add abortion coverage to Rhode Island's Medicaid program and to the insurance coverage for state employees at a projected cost of $622,000. The legislation repeals a section of state law banning Rhode Island from including any provision that provides coverage for induced abortions in any health insurance contracts with state employees. The current law exempts instances when the life of the mother would be endangered if the fetus were carried to term, or when the pregnancy resulted from rape or incest. The Rhode Island measure follows a pattern that has emerged during the first legislative sessions in most states since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Republicans are moving to make abortion restrictions tougher, while Democratic-dominated states are moving to protect access for their residents and residents of other states arriving for care. In other words, equal protection, due process for all. Amy Beth Hansen, Hallelujah Hedero, and Matthew Brown of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. 5 TikTok content creators have filed a lawsuit seeking to overturn Montana's first-in-the-nation ban on the video sharing app, arguing the law is an unconstitutional violation of free speech rights. The Montana residents also argued in the complaint, filed in federal court late Wednesday without public notice, that the state does not have any authority over matters of national security. Republican Governor Greg Gianforte signed the bill into law on Wednesday and said it would protect Montana residents' private data and their personal information from being harvested by the Chinese government. The ban is scheduled to take effect on January 1st of 2024. The law takes the broadest possible approach to its objectives, restricting and banning the protected speech of all TikTok users in Montana to prevent the speculative and unsubstantiated possibility that the Chinese government might direct TikTok Inc. or its parent to spy on some Montana users, the complaint states. We expected a legal challenge and are fully prepared to defend the law, said Emily Flower, spokeswoman from the Montana Department of Justice. TikTok has argued the law infringes on people's First Amendment rights. However, spokesperson Brooke Oberwetter declined to comment on the lawsuit yesterday, Thursday. She also declined to say whether the company helped coordinate the complaint. The plaintiffs are Montana residents who use the video sharing app for things like promoting a business, connecting with military veterans, sharing outdoor adventures, or expressing their sense of humor. What about dog and cat vids? The 2 of them have more than 200,000 followers. One content creator, Carly Ann Goddard, shares videos about living on a ranch, parenting, recipes, and home decor. Her account has 97,000 followers and has allowed her to roughly triple her family's household income. And the complaint has that in its statement. TikTok creators can make money in several ways, including by being paid to advertise products to their followers. The lawsuit, filed just after Gianforte signed the measure into law, states the ban would immediately and permanently deprive plaintiffs of their ability to express themselves and communicate with others, let alone stop making a revenue stream. Montana can no more ban its residents from viewing or posting to TikTok than it could ban the Wall Street Journal because of who owns it, or the ideas it publishes, the plaintiff's attorneys wrote. The case would serve, or could serve, as a testing ground for the TikTok-free America many lawmakers have envisioned. Cybersecurity experts said it could be difficult to enforce. Some lawmakers, the FBI, and officials at other agencies are concerned the video sharing app owned by ByteDance could be used to allow the Chinese government to access information on U.S. citizens or push pro-Beijing misinformation that could influence the public. Because look what Russia's done to these, conservative white nationalists. My God. TikTok says none of this has ever happened. A former executive at ByteDance alleges the tech giant has served as a propaganda tool for the Chinese government, a claim ByteDance says is baseless. China passed laws in 2014 and 2017 to compel companies to cooperate with the country's government for state intelligence work. TikTok says it has never been asked to hand over its data. It would not do so if asked. More than half the U.S. states, including Montana, and the federal government have banned TikTok from government-owned devices. Opponents say Montana residents could easily circumvent the ban by using a virtual private network, a service that shields Internet users by encrypting their data traffic. preventing others from observing their web browsing. Montana state officials say geofencing technology is used with online sports gambling apps, which are deactivated in states where online gambling is illegal. Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The firearms industry, including gun sellers, could be sued for alleged violations of Illinois law, including marketing to young people under legislation Illinois state senators approved yesterday, Thursday. The House previously approved the bill, and now it goes to Governor J.B. Pritzker, who said that he will sign it. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul spearheaded the proposal. Republican lawmakers objected to the proposal during Thursday's Senate vote, saying it was too broad and could lead to court challenges. The Federal Protection of Lawful Commerce of Arms Act, approved in 2005, broadly exempts gun makers from being sued for injuries caused by criminal misuse of their products. But it provides exceptions, including an allegation that the manufacturer or seller violated state or federal law on the sale or marketing of firearms. Senate President Don Harmon from Oak Park said the proposal makes clear that the industry must comply with Illinois law, including a prohibition on marketing guns to anyone under 18. Before yesterday's vote, Harmon referenced advertising campaigns for the Junior 15 rifle that dubbed the weapons smaller, safer, and lighter. This is how people are marketing guns to our children, he said. Indeed. All right, let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, themes are not just for 8th grade book reports. One of the joys of the Marvel flicks is finding quality where you least expect it, like in Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I mean, where the first one felt zippy and fresh and argued that there's moral and emotional righteousness when heterogeneous groups work together against divisive homogeneous totalitarians, the second one did fall into familiar action movie central white male daddy issue land. And, as She-Hulk so aptly pointed out, they doubled down, two daddies, same issues. But I have a friend who had just lost her father who found it very moving. We all bring different things to stories and take different things from them. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 takes a step back from central male myopia and a step towards an ensemble film, which, yay, if only because Team Guardians has made all these great characters whom we don't want to see just as Peter Quill love interests and Star-Lord's second bananas. Also, rather than having one's past trauma-generated emotional issues magically resolved at the end of 2.5 hours, here we end with characters realizing they must face what they're avoiding so their work can begin. The former narrative is more immediately gratifying, yes, but I argue the latter is more relevant to our lives. For instance, Peter Quill must confront his obsessiveness. Appropriately, our villain, the High Evolutionary, serves as Quill's foil because his obsession to make a perfect world drives him to destructive cruelty. He differs from Quill and crew in that he works to gratify himself, while they, ultimately, work to better things for others. That's why good Guardians stories, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, put our heroes against backdrops of groups and societies. Guardians movies, as valuable for what they say as what they do. Don't worry, Volume 3 does a lot. There are killer fight scenes, great Groot and Drax moments, and a rocket backstory that is much, much more harrowing than you're ready for. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury, and ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break?
because she may not be having lunch again until September.
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table.
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time
landing a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Ready for our little forest adventure?
Yes!
Too much waiting for me. Yeah, I wanna go outside. I wanna be.
We're here.
Whoa, that was fast.
There's a forest closer than you think. Find a park or forest near you and music inspired by nature at discovertheforest.org. Brought to you by USDA Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Warning! This Civil Liberties Minute contains a gruesome description of a mass murder. I'm Bill Newman, and we'll give another second here for people to turn off their radios. Recently, the editor-in-chief of The Week magazine, William E. Falk, described a police officer rushing to the scene of a mass shooting in Allen, Texas, coming upon bloody, torn bodies scattered on the ground next to the dead killer and his assault rifle, including a little girl whose face was no longer. No mainstream publication, including his, the editor wrote, would publish such photos for many reasons. The need for family consent, preserving the dignity of the dead, and the sensibility of readers. But then, the editor recalled the importance of images in our history. The photo of Emmett Till, the image of the 9-year-old Vietnamese girl burned by napalm, the photos of Iraqis tortured at Abu Ghraib, the George Floyd video. The editor raised the question whether the media's withholding gruesome images from mass murders is anesthetizing the public, whether that self-censorship serves the interest of reporting the news as the country continues to consider what action, if any, to take with regard to rapid-fire, high-capacity assault rifles. He raises the question whether that self-censorship is something we, the public, actually need and deserve or want. After all, if we really don't want to look, we can turn the page or turn off the TV. Or the radio. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. That was the day that black author and Marxist theorist C.L.R. James passed away. James was born in Trinidad, at the time a Caribbean colony that was part of the British Empire. His father was a school teacher. James became a leading intellectual on the subject of black liberation. His most famous work, The Black Jacobins, tells the story of the 1791 Haitian Revolution, when enslaved black Haitians successfully overthrew French colonial rule. James was a frequent contributor to Labor Action, a Marxist journal produced in New York from 1940 to 1958. He wrote about the struggles of black workers. He often penned fiery language. For example, in 1941, James wrote an article imploring black workers not to cross the picket line during a strike against the Ford Motor Company in Detroit. Ford had a reputation of hiring black workers at a time when many employers discriminated in their employment practices. But James warned his readers that the Ford Company was no friend to the worker and that the company was attempting to use race to keep its workforce divided. James wrote, quote, "Ford is one of the most dangerous dangerous enemies of labor who exist in this country. This enemy of society has been laying a train of race hatred in Detroit and is now about to touch it off. The organized working class movement and the Negroes will have to fight hard and long to check and frustrate and defeat this sinister plot. This will be no easy fight. In other articles, James also used his pen to call out labor unions for not including black workers and to call for the unification of black and white workers in their struggle. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the upper 80s to low 90s. Sunny throughout the day with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear to partly cloudy overnight with lows in the mid to upper 50s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and then a few passing clouds tomorrow, otherwise generally sunny, and that will be the case throughout the weekend. Near record high temperatures, though, highs in the upper 80s to mid 90s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is rated very high in the little hamlet of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 21 parts per million, and that daytime UV index remains very high at level 8, so take care. Barometric pressure is rising ever so slightly at 30.06 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 74%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 63 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 68 and sunny. Rome is 73 and fair, and they continue with their thunderstorm electrical disruption warning. Kyiv is 71 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 64 and clear. Hong Kong is 82 and fair. Tokyo is 65 degrees with rain. Sydney, Australia is 41 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 53 and mostly cloudy, and New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Staff at the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. French lawmakers have voted to ban smoking in all forests and woods during the fire season, part of a series of proposed measures to tackle growing destruction and dangers from climate change-related blazes. National Assembly lawmakers voted 197-0 in a first reading on Wednesday night of a proposed law to prevent or to better prevent and tackle forest fires. The draft has already passed through the Senate. An amendment also adopted by lawmakers would ban smoking in or near all forests and woods when authorities deem the fire risk to be elevated. The fire season that was commonly in summer is now extending to other months in drought-hit areas of southern France and other parts of Europe where climate warming poses the greater risks. France's firefighters have already battled woodland-destroying blazes that started unusually early this year. Droughts that hit France last year have been compounded by shortages of rain this past winter, leaving tinder-dry woodlands at even greater risk. The smoking ban will build on an existing forest law that already bans the lighting of fires within 200 meters of wooded areas. It aims to reduce the risk of fires started by discarded cigarettes, a frequent cause of blazes, especially when woodlands are tinder dry. The government says human activity is by far the most frequent trigger of forest fires in France, responsible for 90% of the blazes. Lawmaker Anthony Brosse, who proposed the smoking amendment, said it would make the legislation clearer for French citizens. Senators and National Assembly makers will work next on a final draft of the proposed law before its expected adoption. Forest fires have long regularly afflicted France, one of the most wooded countries in Europe, but they generally used to start later in the year. Major wildfires in Europe are now starting earlier, becoming more frequent and harder to stop, and doing more damage. Scientists say they'll likely get worse as climate change intensifies. The Mediterranean region is warming faster than the global average.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Bernard Condon of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A dozen poor countries are facing economic instability and even collapse under the weight of hundreds of billions of dollars in foreign loans, much of them from the world's biggest and most unforgiving government lender, China. An Associated Press analysis of a dozen countries most indebted to China, including Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, Laos, and Mongolia, found paying back that debt is consuming an ever greater amount of tax revenue needed to keep schools open, provide electricity, and pay for food and fuel. And it's draining foreign currency reserves. Those countries used to pay interest on those loans, leaving some with just months before that money is gone. Behind the scenes is China's reluctance to forgive debt and its extreme secrecy about how much money it has loaned and on what terms, which has kept other major lenders from stepping in to help. On top of that is the recent discovery that borrowers have been required to put cash in hidden escrow accounts that push China to the front of the line of creditors to be paid. Countries in the AP's analysis had as much as 50% of their foreign loans from China, and most were devoting more than a third of government revenue to paying off foreign debt. Two of them, Zambia and Sri Lanka, have already gone into default, unable to even make interest payments on loans financing the construction of ports, mines, and power plants. In Pakistan, millions of textile workers have been laid off because the country has too much foreign debt and cannot afford to keep the electricity on and machines running. In Kenya, the government has held back paychecks to thousands of civil service workers to save cash to pay foreign loans. The president's chief economic advisor tweeted last month, "Salaries or default. Take your pick." Since Sri Lanka defaulted a year ago, 500,000 industrial jobs have vanished, inflation has pierced 50%, and more than half the population in many parts of the country has fallen into poverty. Experts predict that unless China begins to soften its stance on its loans to poor countries, there could be a wave of more defaults and political upheavals. Is that a feature and not a bug? Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.